Judge a man by his questions rather than his answers. This is a quote from Voltaire, and over the course of his life, he would question a lot of people. Since Voltaire was very young, his father really wanted him to listen to what he said, as a lot of parents do. And Voltaire never had to actually say no. Through the course of his life, he basically, within every action, would tell his father, "No, I'm going to do what I want." And as you'll notice, disobedience is a key trait of Voltaire. Voltaire would start writing at a very young age, and when he got into his 20s, he fell in love with a girl, and then she basically said, after a little while, she said, "No, I think we're done here." And this would be a big event in Voltaire's life that would change the way he would think about things, and after this, he became very depressed and just started writing all the time, constantly, never stopping. A lot of his writings and his plays would cause him to be exiled from France, as well as being put in the Bastille many times. And when Voltaire got a little older, a famous actress named Adrienne Lecouvreur died at age 38. And the reason why this is important is not just because he would write plays and these people would sometimes, most of the time not because they would get in trouble, but sometimes perform his plays. This was significant to him because when this woman died, this actress died, she was thrown into a ditch. Her body was not given proper burial. And this was due to the fact that the royalty would often go to plays and they loved it. But at this time in France, the royalty was also connected to the church. The government was connected to the church. And the church hated these actors and actresses. So whenever one of them died, they would never give them proper burial. And this is actually something that would scare Voltaire and would be a major fear of his throughout his life. Most people that know anything about Voltaire know that he was very wealthy, but they probably don't know how he became wealthy. While Voltaire was in Paris, he made contact with some old friends. Among them was Charles Marie, a very young and brilliant mathematician. And at this time in France, the government decided to create a lottery system. And it wasn't a once-in-a-while sort of lottery. It was very, very often. And this mathematician noticed loopholes within this system. In a book about Voltaire, they say, the French state financed its activities partly by taxation, partly by issuing government loans, normally issued as bonds in the name of Hôtel de Ville. But the state's expenditure chronically outran its income, and the authorities regularly had to resort to desperate expedients. One of these was to cut the rate of interest paid on state loans. This is what they had done 1716, and they did it again in 1727. By reducing the rate of interest, however, the authorities had also reduced the attractiveness of government loans. The market value of the outstanding bonds had fallen steeply, and this made it difficult for government to raise money by issuing new loans. So in 1728, the finance minister tried to restore the perceived value of government bonds by launching a state lottery. Holders of the bonds would be entitled to buy lottery tickets, and if they won, their bond would be repaid not at its devalued market price, but at its official face value. To promote ticket sales, the government would also provide a large prize of $500,000 each month, later raised to $600,000 each month. So basically, what Voltaire and his friends did, he got a group of investors, and they would buy so many bonds that they could enter into the lottery so many times, and within a year, Voltaire had made $500,000. When the French government figured this out, they tried to change the rules. And this actually went to court, but the court ruled that this would be illegal. You can't do that. So Voltaire and his friends continued to make more and more money over time, and he eventually became very, very rich. And going back to the famous actress, because of what happened to her not being given proper burial, he became more and more anti-government and anti-elite. After Voltaire became super rich, he ended up living in Ferney, just on the edge of France, and Geneva, where he built his church and his theater. This was far enough away that the government of France could not get to him, and that he could be close enough to Geneva to have his theater. In fact, Voltaire would actually preach inside his own church, and he designed a tomb for himself attached to the side of the church as well. On his tomb, he put, "The wicked will say, I'm neither inside nor out." Voltaire spent a lot of time in Ferney. In fact, some of the people that he had working on his property would play chess with him a lot. Voltaire also often spoke to Frederick the Great about philosophy and specifically how neither of them liked war. But as soon as Frederick the Great got the most power he would ever have, he immediately went to war, and this caused their whole relationship to end. Because Voltaire was living close to Geneva, he often heard of Jean Rousseau. They both believed in liberty, but they seemed to hate each other so much. As Voltaire became more and more popular and more loved by people and more hated by government, many of his readers of his books or plays would be wrongly convicted of things they did not do. In fact, there was this one case where a 19-year-old boy named Lebert was charged with several other boys with having torn down a sacred crucifix. There was no evidence that he committed the heinous offense, but he did confess and he had sung some religious songs. Lebert was a reader of Voltaire's philosophical dictionary, also of Great Diderot. This was enough. He was condemned to death, his tongue was cut out with hot irons, his head cut off, and his body thrown into the flames, together with the philosophical dictionary. When Voltaire heard of this terrible news, he decided to take on the case, and he would fight back constantly to prove that Lebert was innocent. Sadly, this was after he had already died. But Voltaire took on many cases like these, and he won most of them. But just as with Lebert's case, many of these people he was defending were already dead. But when he proved that these people were innocent, it caused the people around to further distrust the government. And throughout Voltaire's whole life, he would seed these ideas within people's heads of liberty, love of liberty, and hatred of tyranny. Throughout Voltaire's life, he had been seeding revolution in the minds of the people of France. And towards the end of his life, he started to see the beginnings of a revolution. And when Voltaire died, it was basically the spark that lit the forest fire, known as the French Revolution. Although I think that the revolution took a turn that Voltaire would not have wanted. And sadly, many years after Voltaire's death, his fear became a reality. His body, as well as Jean Rousseau's body, were buried very close together. And then when the Bourbons came to power in France in 1814, the French government basically took their bones and threw it away, not giving them a proper burial. And remember, that was the thing that Voltaire feared his whole life. Why did he fear it? I don't know. It seems kind of weird to fear not having a proper burial, especially for someone who wasn't very religious and very opposed to religion most of his life. Near the end of his life, he actually confessed to many priests, and he became more okay with religion. Of course, there's a lot more to Voltaire's story, and I can't tell you all of it in this video. There's just no way. But what makes Voltaire a great man? First of all, he had a moral compass, and every great man has a moral compass, a compass which guides him in the right direction in his life. And going with this, he knew what he wanted. He knew what he wanted to accomplish, and money for him was not the main thing, although it certainly helped him accomplish what he wanted to do. He had a passion for life, and specifically for writing. He also had the ability to influence people through his writings and his plays. That doesn't mean to manipulate them. It means to influence them. And I think he did the right thing by influencing the people of France to have more of a love for liberty and view themselves as individuals, not part of the state. Going with this, Voltaire also had a love for liberty. And for any great man, liberty is essential. Why? Well, because great men, or at least to become a great man, having many different experiences is definitely part of it. And if there's not liberty around these great men, they tend to create it for themselves. They want to craft their environment into what they want it to be like. Voltaire was also an excellent writer. And great men need to have good skills. They need to be really good at a certain set of skills. And for Voltaire, writing was his skill. Voltaire also had a constant drive throughout his life. Constant. He would keep going. And that's essential for great men. Anyway, this was Voltaire. another great man. I recommend you guys check out some books about him, and maybe even some of his books and plays as well, because he is such a interesting person, as many of the great men mentioned on this channel are. And frankly, each one of these great men's lives are worth looking into. But thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.